Hi, welcome to our presentation on cybrid embryo research and their ethical issues. I'm Ryan.
I'm Caio.
And I'm Isabel.
A cybrid embryo was a cytoplasmic hybrid, first named this by Barn and his team in 1974 when studying mitochondrial DNA in vitro. Cybrid embryos are incredibly useful medical tools for research and treatment of miscarriages, Alzheimer's disease, and to understand the process of embryonic development further. Cybrid embryos are created by combining a somatic cell nucleus with an oocyte from a cow or a rabbit in a process called somatic cell nuclear transfer. They're 99% human DNA with a small amount of animal mitochondrial DNA left in the donor egg. This, however, has created some concerns as to whether this is safe. But do the benefits of using cybrids outweigh the costs, and what potential do these embryos have in the future?
So how do you create a cybrid embryo? Let me show you how.
So here we have a cow and a human patient. We extract the unfertilized egg from the cow and the adult human cell from the patient. So we take the human cell and remove the nucleus, extracting most of the DNA, and then we take the embryo and extract its nucleus. So now we insert the human nucleus into the empty cow oocyte via somatic nuclear transfer. Let's just zoom into this. This is then stimulated and allowed the cells to proliferate.
So, why use hybrids? First of all, why use stem cells? Stem cells have emerged a few years ago with the great potential to be a very powerful tool in regenerative medicine. But the availability today does not match the need, so you have to find alternative ways to collect them. The main source we have today is IVF clinics, where embryos that would be discarded can be cultivated in a laboratory. Another option is egg donation, but the amount available is not enough. Another option that we have is iPSC cells, but the cost to produce them is much higher than the hybrids. Animal eggs are easily available, and the animal population that can donate eggs outnumbers the human population. For example, in the UK in 2013, the cattle population for itself was about 7 million, while the female population in 2011 was about 32 million. And we have to consider that there are other options from collecting eggs apart from the cattle. We have rabbits, mice, and at an abattoir, eggs are a byproduct that are discarded, so we can easily and readily collect them from the sources. So, using the sources, we can increase the supply of stem cells, leading to several advances in many areas, and the most important of all is the regenerative medicine. The cybrids were authorized by the 2008 Human Fertilization and Embryology Act. Since then, it's an alternative for the research in stem cells. The main challenge in the future is to understand the interaction of nuclear DNA and the mitochondrial DNA, because in cybrids, more than 99% of the cell is human, but it's not 100% because of the mitochondrial DNA. And understanding those interactions could help in other areas. For example, mitochondrial malfunction is one of the main parts of Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. So, understanding how interaction nucleus mitochondria work may help understand how this disease develops. So, using the cybrids could also help to develop possible therapies.
In theory, cybrid embryos seem like a brilliant idea, but what have they actually been used to achieve so far? Well, earlier this year, researchers infused nuclear DNA from people with sporadic Parkinson's disease into rabbit eggs, and they used this method to create a cell model of a nerve cell that has sporadic Parkinson's disease. And this is a brilliant model because it can be used to investigate Parkinson's disease with a very high degree of accuracy, because it is so much like a Parkinson's disease cell. Okay. This technique is already been employed in other areas. Researchers have used this cell model to study mitochondrial dysfunction in Alzheimer's disease, which is believed to be one of the key causes of Alzheimer's. These researchers found that cell signaling pathways in the mitochondria break down, resulting in dysfunction in the mitochondria. They also found evidence to suggest that antioxidants could be used to therapeutic effects in some cases of Alzheimer's disease. Today on Big Questions, cyber embryo research, miracle research breakthrough, or Frankenstein science? We'll be talking to scientists working in the field of stem cell research, a scientist vehemently opposed to cyber embryo research, a vicar representing the Church of England, and you, the general public. So, why even carry out cyber embryo research? Isabel?
Cybrid embryos are proven to be highly advantageous in medical research. Embryonic stem cells are derived from embryos which are not used in IVF clinics. However, the demand for these embryos is very high. Using cybrid embryos reduces the need for human embryos, as animal eggs such as cow are readily available as they're used in food production, and they are waste products materials found in the abattoir.
A very well-reasoned argument. What's your opinion, Dr. Kyle?
It is unnatural. Species are unable to mix material in nature as they are not compatible with each other to prevent hybrids from forming as they are unfit to survive. Over evolution, species have adapted mechanisms to prevent crossover of species, such as different mating seasons and physical barriers. Even nature trying to tell us this is a bad idea.
We're not creating half animal, half human creatures. This is purely for medical research, using the animal egg as a host for human DNA to simulate an embryo, creating a medical tool such as embryonic stem cells.
As the cyber embryos contain 100% nuclear DNA, it is considered human. I believe at the time of conception the embryo is a living entity and should be protected. It is morally wrong to create an embryo purely for scientific research. I also believe that destroying the embryo after use, 14 days, it is murder, as this embryo may have the potential to grow into a living organism.
The use of the embryo is discontinued at 14 days once the primitive streak starts to develop. This means that the embryo will not have a nervous system and cannot feel pain or emotion. These embryos will not be viable for development.
And let's see what our studio audience can add to this debate.
Where will this research lead? Who is to say that those creating these embryos will not go down the slippery slope to the creation of other more drastic ideas, potentially creating a human-animal hybrid creatures which could have animal medical issues as a consequence, or be a danger to society?
Again, the embryo is destroyed after 14 days by law, under the HFE Act of 2008. No living organism is allowed to develop past the formation of the primitive streak, so the creation of the hybrid organism has been prevented. Those abusing the law will be prosecuted. These embryos will never be implanted into a human or animal womb. This is again against the law and violates human rights.
The stem cells created by the cyber embryos are not allowed to be used for clinical use purely for research. As they are a mix of both animal and human tissues, would the results from the experiment conducted be reliable?
The cybrids have 99% human DNA and 100% nuclear DNA. The only alteration is due to the presence of the animal mitochondria within the animal host egg. Most experimentations done with these cybrids will be reliable. Better doing it than not doing it at all.
What stance does the Church of England have on this issue, Mr. Vicar?
Some believe creating embryos is like playing God. I am from the Church of England, and I believe that what you scientists are doing out of a Frankenstein proportion, you cannot justify creating life like that. God would not allow it.
This is a difficult statement to answer. It is important to consider everyone's beliefs and opinions, but I can assure you that this is for the greater good, helping save so many lives and reducing some suffering around the world, by increasing our knowledge into deadly genetic diseases and disorders. Here's a question for you. Do you accept war? War is where life and death decisions are made every single day, and often kill for political causes. Could you condone this for the greater good?
It violates human dignity and blurs the line between human and animals. Each individual human being has the right to life and must be considered equal to others.
These embryos will never be a person. The egg would otherwise be waste material. They are unfit to be living.
We are messing with the unknown. We don't know what the effects are of these embryos. Could be disastrous. There's a risk that mixing both animal and human DNA could result in the formation of diseases. How do you know this will be safe for society?
Within cybrid embryos, nuclear DNA is 100% human, so the tests are likely to be reliable and true to how a human cell would react if the diseases tested are encoded by the nuclear DNA.
Anyway, that concludes our debate. Some very well-reasoned arguments, I think you'll agree. Thank you all for tuning in, and from us here in the studio, have a great Thursday.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. What are your views on cybrid embryos?
Cybrid embryos?
Yeah. Let's give you questions about your thoughts on cybrid embryos. That's okay. Yeah, go for it. What do you think of embryos?
Oh, well, I don't really know too much about it. But they sound pretty important for the research into genetic diseases. Personally, I think they're a bit barbaric. You know, it doesn't feel right putting two species together. It's immoral. It goes against the genetic code, if you ask me, but that's how I feel about it.
I'm sure I feel comfortable using the animals, and it's a bit unethical.
You can do this research into genetic diseases without actually having to use human embryos that have been aborted. So you haven't got that immoral side, which would keep a lot of people off researching using.
Good if it works, I think it'll be good for research, but...
Great.
So I think it's great, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Personally, I believe it's important to educate the public about cybrid embryos, how they're created, the reasons for using these embryos, and the potential benefits they might have. Within the media, there's plenty of scaremongering around these cybrid embryos, leading to the creation of drastic ideas of half-human, half-animal creatures terrifying the earth. This has been portrayed not just in our newspapers, but in paintings, sculptures, and even in our cinemas. In 2009, the film Splice hit our screens, where manipulating human and animal DNA goes terribly wrong. Here's a clip.
What was that? A mistake.
Many religious grievances have been raised with regard to cybrid embryos, but when push comes to shove, we're not creating chimeras, and none of the proposed embryos will be allowed to develop past 14 days. Therefore, if you can tolerate other forms of stem cell research, why can't you tolerate this?
Overall, considering the evidence, we feel that cybrid embryos are a really valuable medical tool. They've enabled scientists to research into how embryos develop, how tissue forms, and finding cures for diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. The knowledge we can gain from this kind of research is invaluable, and to remove this from society would be detrimental. Because embryos are in such short supply, it would make sense to use animal eggs as they are in such high demand. It would be economically sensible.
So, it's important to educate general public about cybrid embryos so can they back our research. We are pros about them. What about you?